my fellow Americans? Are we reaping our harvest of greed? Have we built our house on sinking sand? Why are we being ugly Americans?
Hi, this is CJ Holmes, founder of Economies for Justice and your host for today's Weekdays Live. And I think we've got our technical problems fixed. And in the news, of course, welcome to Monday. There's more outrage over the Independent Foreclosure Review. I've even gotten emails from clients who have received their $300 for stealing their house, and they are completely upset, as you would imagine. Fortunately, we have another link, major media. I'd like to play that right now so that we can share that with everybody. This is really potent. This is the fraud coming home to roost, and this is how the banks are cheating the people.
But first, the most shocking piece of news today is this seemingly innocuous document. A simple, sterile page, a printout of a spreadsheet with numbers. Boring. But what the numbers represent is a massive nationwide crime scene. No, I mean that. That document is a summary of widespread and systemic error, malfeasance, and reckless lack of care on the part of our nation's biggest banks. What those numbers show are banks foreclosing on military service members who are entitled to relief, of banks foreclosing on homeowners who had been approved for a loan modification, of banks even foreclosing on homeowners who were not behind in their payments, not in default, current. In fact, amazingly, on that sheet of paper is the number 53, which denotes there are at least 53 documented cases of homeowners who were completely current on their payments being successfully foreclosed on. Not just having foreclosure proceedings initiated against them, but these are people who are making their payments, paying their mortgage, and actually have their homes taken from them for no reason. According to the findings posted just today by a federal bank regulator as part of a settlement agreement with a number of major banks, between 2009 and 2010, foreclosure proceedings that were wrongful or in some way contained bank error commenced against nearly 4 million homeowners. About 30% of foreclosures had those being foreclosed on had to battle potentially wrongful efforts to seize their homes. 30%. More than 244,000 eventually lost their homes. Today, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, the regulator who compiled these statistics and came to its settlement with the banks, it was supposed to be announcing good news. It was supposed to be announcing money to those who have been victimized by the bank's practices. But given the scale of the deception and error, the amount of money on the table for those who've been victimized is in most instances cartoonishly small. A pittance compared to the billions of dollars about a dozen banks and their affiliates likely saved by getting this settlement deal. For example, there's the category of homeowners who were foreclosed on, that is, successfully kicked out of their homes, even though the borrowers had worked out a new payment plan with their bank to stay in their home and they'd stuck to it. There are 234,000 of them. Another 865,000 were in the process of foreclosure, even though they too had gone to the bank and worked out a new payment plan. That, by the way, is euphemistically known as dual tracking, where a bank is processing your loan modification while also simultaneously pursuing foreclosure against you. A better term would simply call it double dealing or double crossing. So the 1,099,000 victims of dual tracking get $500 each. $500. It's a number so hilariously low, it has spawned Alexis Goldstein's What You Can Buy for Having Your House Stolen. One of her suggestions, this 2-meter dome for those homeowners lucky enough to get $5,000 from the settlement. Which brings us to our next notable category, homeowners in which the servicer initiated or completed foreclosure on a borrower who was not in default. If the foreclosure was completed on a homeowner who was not in default, $125,000. Now, $125,000, that is a lot of money. But that's $125,000 for taking your home away from you without any justification. These are people who did nothing wrong. They were not in default. They were current on their payments, and their homes were taken. In any other context, we would say they were stolen. They'll get $125,000 for their trouble. The outrage of that category matched perhaps only by this one. Servicer foreclosed on borrower eligible for Service Members Civil Relief Act. Translation: wrongfully foreclosing on active duty members of the armed forces. It's a criminal felony. The banks merely pay out $125,000 to those victims. All the other awards in all the other categories pay out mostly nominal amounts. Many of the 3.5 million homeowners who received some kind of payment were supposed to get an independent review from the government. But the Federal Reserve and the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, or OCC, punted. They punted because this independent review process to look into a system that was so deeply flawed and messed up that everyone around the country was scratching their heads. This deeply flawed system, as the New York Times characterized it. Instead, the OCC engineered a mass settlement. They got halfway through it and they said, you know what? No. Let's come to the table. What should the banks pay? And that is represented by this document. What it represents is, in any intuitive sense, the evidence of a crime wave that once again the banks will not have to answer for. Joining us from...
Exactly. It's a crime wave. And we need to get this out to the public. Now, let me remind you of what we talked about last week. And I think I will add at the end of the comment section all of those links. I just opened up the Word document that I have with all those links on them because we talked about there's a whistleblower report, and I'm going to be showing you, I got now today the full link for the entire Senate hearing, Banking Committee hearing on this. We've been playing snips from Elizabeth Warren, but you should hear Sherrod Brown. There's some really fabulous pieces of that. Last week we discussed that there were, 4 million should have been reviewed. Only 800,000 persons actually asked for the independent foreclosure review, actually signed up. They only reviewed 114,000. It cost $2 billion to the independent foreclosure review companies. You'll see in some of the hearings that some of the companies do actually admit how many millions they were paid. 175 million from Chase or 175 million from Citigroup, whatever those numbers were, they were big. I remember 175 million twice, several times, same company paid by the different banks. We've done the numbers, and at 114,000 foreclosures being reviewed, divided by 2 billion, 114,000 into 2 billion, that's $17,500 per review. The others have commented that the reviewers were paid $250 an hour, and that comment was $10,000 per review. Now you'll see from the chart the people are getting $300 or $500 or even $125,000 when the banksters should be put in prison. These are criminal charges, and yet they're being allowed to buy it off. A couple of other things that I wanted to bring to your attention in this whole crime wave and cover-up. I do remember the comment from somebody, I don't remember where, that the OCC wanted to hurry up and do this settlement because it was just before the CFPB could have taken over. And the CFPB, the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, I am positive would not have been as generous or willing to overlook the crimes that the OCC is willing to do. Obviously, they're bought off. They're paid. They're looking either at their future, careers, or that's just the way it's been working for so long. That's what they expect. They are to protect the banks. The OCC is trying to protect the banks. It's pretty obvious. I also wanted to mention a couple things he said. 30% of the foreclosures are deemed harmful. In the whistleblower report, which we showed on Friday, they claimed the reviewers themselves, when they were interviewed, identified between 40% and 100% of the foreclosures, the people were harmed, that they were faulty. And so the number 30%, you're going to see that a lot, but that is the lowest number that was ever mentioned in the whistleblower report. And also I wanted to mention, he showed some of those charts, which I'll put that chart at the end of the comments also. We looked at that last week. He talks about, if you looked on the chart, some of it said in process, others said completed. And remember what Linda said last week? She talked about reviews that she knew personally should have fallen within 2009 and 2010. It's just those 2 years. And they delayed until it would fall in 2011 and not be included in this report. So a lot of those, when we look at those in process, chances are the banks, knowing that this review was going to be coming, because they're the insiders, they know what's happening. That is the point. They're the insiders manipulating everything. So they would delay as many as possible. So they had 53 completed, but they had dozens, hundreds, thousands in process. So the issue is where this whole fiasco and discussion is simply about the foreclosures in 2009 and 2010. So I ask you, what about 2011? What about 2012? What about those going on right now? Don't think they have changed their behavior. Does a tiger change its spots? So here's the link now to the hearing. This is the entire hearing. It's a couple of hours. I'm certainly not going to play it. I will play another section of Elizabeth Warren drilling the OCC about releasing the information. The OCC now has fraudulent information on record, and she wants to know bank by bank who cheated the homeowners. Listen to this. It's really discouraging and disgusting, and we must rise up and do something about it.
Let me just make sure I understand this completely. I want to know on a bank-by-bank basis the number of families that were illegally foreclosed on. Will you give me that information?
Eventually, we're going to issue a statement to the public where we provide additional information, but if we go through the processes that I described previously, we can share it to Congress in its oversight capacity.
So you're saying you will make that information publicly available?
I did not say that. I said that we're planning on issuing a public statement that wraps up the IFR and
That's
provides
not what
additional
I'm
information.
asking for.
Yeah.
What I'm asking for is a bank-by-bank analysis of how many families they illegally foreclosed on. Will you give us that information?
We can provide that to Congress in its oversight capacity if we go through the normal processes that we're prepared to follow.
And why are you not making that public? I just want to make sure I understand.
I don't know that there's been a decision not to. I think that we're still
Are
evaluating
you
what we're going to release
claiming,
publicly.
are you claiming that the information about illegal activity is privileged and confidential?
It's all part of it is all confidential supervisory information, but that does not mean that we won't at some point release some of that information. That decision just hasn't been made at this point.
So you're saying when you find evidence of illegal activities
Yes.
by the banks, when
Yes.
they have illegally foreclosed
Yes.
against homeowners, that information is privileged and you will not release it without a letter from Congress?
If it is derived from the bank examination process, yes, it is.
How else would you get it?
Well, sometimes you get information through third parties, through outside sources, but in this case, that's not
So
the case.
unless someone throws a rock through the window with this information tied to it, you will not release it? Is that what you're saying?
To the extent that the information is confidential supervisory information derived from the exam process, it is subject to privilege. We don't ordinarily make that public. However, in this case, we do plan on making public issuances describing further findings and further analysis of the process.
On a bank-by-bank basis of illegal activity?
I don't know if that's been determined yet.
All right, so
It's not been determined yet. Ain't that great? This is the point. This is what a regulator cover-up looks like. Just remember that. That's what it looks like. They're not going to answer the question, and they're not going to give in. And this is what we're up against. Now, this is a fascinating article. The Government Accounting Office blames the regulators for the faulty foreclosure reviews, but here in Forbes, this is not the whole story. Take a look at this. It wasn't a bug. This is what they planned on doing. This is the point. That is what they did. It was a planned feature. This was a conspiracy between the regulators, the banks, and the independent foreclosure reviewer companies. They hired those that had no expertise. Are you kidding? And then we already know from the whistleblower report that when, things were found, because the people weren't stupid and they would read this and go, what? Then that wasn't counted. Those items were dismissed and or, given to management and then buried. That is the point. It was a conspiracy, and this is what a conspiracy looks like. Let's just be real honest about it. This is the point. That is what they're doing. That is how they are going to game the system and have been gaming the system. And here we have the proof. Let's move into Geithner's legacy. The 0.2% hold $7.8 trillion, or 69% of all assets, and $212 trillion of all derivative liabilities. Now, let's look down at this little article because they have some really nice charts. So now, of course, he is not Secretary of the Treasury anymore. That's Jacob Lew. But while he was there, and they call here clueless pandering, stop paying attention to these kinds of words. Be sensitive to every time you read these. It wasn't clueless pandering. Are you kidding me? Geithner's really smart. This was an intentional strategy to put the banks in charge. That's what he planned on doing. So don't call this clueless pandering. And we need to talk to these people that write these articles and say, stop assuming that these people are stupid. They're laughing their way all the way to the bank. That is the point. So let's move down and take a look at this chart. Isn't it great? As of the third quarter of 2012, there were approximately 5,600 commercial banking organizations in the U.S. The bulk of these, roughly 5,500, were community banks with assets of less than $10 billion. These are the local banks and credit unions you and I, we need to partner with. These entities are bearing the brunt too. It's all of us. They're the 1%. So let's connect with our local banks and our local community banks. So community banks and credit unions with assets of less than $10 billion. These community-focused organizations accounted for 98.6% of all banks, but only 12% of the industry assets. Another group, numbering nearly 70 banking organizations with assets between $10 billion and $250 billion, accounted for 1.2% of the banks, while controlling 19% of the industry assets. And then the remaining group, the mega banks, the ones we're talking about, with assets between $250 billion and $2.3 trillion. Okay, now that's a really stupid number. This is truly insane because these numbers are so large, they will ruin the planet. They will destroy our system. That is the point. That's why we talk about this. They're made up of only 12 institutions. These 12, 12 behemoths accounted for roughly 0.2% of all banks, but they hold 69% of the assets. And what does that mean? That means there was $11.25 trillion in total assets domestically chartered commercial banks, but 12 banks control $7.76 trillion. Now, here's another chart, and then I already looked at and will be showing real shortly the Q3 OCC report. Notice that the top 4 banks are the light blue. All other banks are the dark blue. And so then they talk about 4 banks dominate in derivatives, and they don't say here who they are. That's why I went to the report. I wanted to find out who are the banks? Which ones are actually those 4 big banks? To summarize, so the top 4 are responsible for 93.2% of all derivative exposure. This is the scary part because remember what we said last week. The 2005 Bankruptcy Act and the Dodd-Frank Act both stopped the taxpayer from bailing out the banks. That's why they're doing bail-ins now. Think Cyprus. Think it's going to happen to you because this came out of the G20. Remember, the banks have already decided this is how they're going to rescue themselves. They're going to gamble it all away, do whatever they want, pull in mega billions for themselves. If anything goes wrong, they're going to take your account. They're going to bankrupt the people and the country to bail themselves out. That is what's going to happen. That's why we talk about it. And we need to protect ourselves. That's why I bring it up. So here is the OCC's quarterly report. And then if you go down to chart 6B, graph 6B, chart. The quarterly trading revenue as a percentage of gross revenue, cash and derivative positions, the top 4 insured U.S. commercial banks and savings associations by derivative holdings from the first quarter 2009 to the third quarter 2012. And you will notice that we're talking about J.P. Morgan Chase. Gee, what a shock. They own the Federal Reserve. Bank of America. Gee, what a shock. Of course they're going to gamble. Are you kidding? Citibank, also major holder in the Federal Reserve. And Goldman Sachs. There you go. Those are the top 4. Just so that you know. So if you have money in those banks, get them out. Get it out right now. Why are you waiting? Why haven't you done it yet? I'm telling you, get it out. Okay, so Wells Fargo says, not me, not me. And we know that they're a predatory foreclosure company. We know this. They're foreclosing like crazy. The people are fighting like crazy. We already know that 30 to 100% of the foreclosures are illegal. We already know that. You and I know that from the information that we've been following and documenting. If you don't believe me, just go back and watch some of these other live streams. I don't make this stuff up. I'm only just sharing what other people in the places to know are sharing with us. And we just need to pay attention to this. This is the point. So Wells Fargo is saying, wait a minute. It's not all about us. And the fact is they're trying to fight back because the protesters in the street, to senior officers in the nation's banking regulators, there's a growing call to break up the banks. And don't forget, Sherrod Brown, one of the people's representatives working for the people, has some legislation to attempt to break up the banks. I don't think it'll work. I think they need something stronger than that. He's just talking about increasing the cash reserve requirements for these banks to force themselves to break up into smaller entities to keep the cash reserves down. My opinion, even if they did that, it'd be total collusion. They would still just collude as they do right now. So I'm not sure that that's really going to work. But nevertheless, we have to bring it to you. Now, one of the things that I had anticipated doing today and having on board and was told that we would have today with us would be Philip Beard, but he's been called away and can't make it. So we may be able to get him on Thursday, but I did want to start to address what I feel is very important. I'm going to show about Go Local, and we're going to talk about it in more detail probably later this week. The fact of the matter is, when they foreclosed millions of people, and even people like my CPA, tax accountant, has shared with me that it's very depressing, her work right now, because hundreds of her clients, and we're in Sonoma County, hundreds of her clients have gone bankrupt. They've had to file bankruptcy. They've lost all their property. They've lost their wealth. They've lost all those down payments. The small businesses are going broke. And that is the truth. The small banks are in fear of going broke when the mega banks take up all the assets and put everybody else at risk. And I wanted to bring to your attention and have links so that you can review this. This is the chart hierarchy of needs. And as you'll notice, we've been focusing on self-actualization, but as your fortunes shift, as you get knocked sideways, as you lose your money, as the stock market breaks people, as the banks are going to take your accounts, people are going to be forced down this hierarchy. And we're going to be down in the bottom 2 levels where we're worried about food, water, where are we going to sleep, where security, are we going to have any employment, do we have any resources, what about our family and our health and our property. These are the bottom 2 layers, and I believe that this whole world, but particularly in the country and especially where you're living, all your neighbors are going to be forced into this unexpectedly. They are not watching live stream. They are not thinking about what's coming. They want to stay in denial. They want to say things aren't that bad. Don't we all? But here's the point. And I hope we're all totally wrong. I really, really hope that 10 years, 15 years from now, you can say that CJ, she was just so full of it and so wrong. I would love that. I'm afraid I'm not wrong. So what I'm recommending is that we really consider opportunities to protect ourselves. Because if we're wrong, we'll be fine. And if we're right, we'll still be fine too. So what I'm suggesting is not necessarily going to ruin you. It's really going to help you. Watch this. This is a really cool little video.
Gardens build community, period. It's funny to be on the other side of the fence and just hear the comments. You know, people guessing what stuff is, just ooh and ah. Seeing somebody out here at 6 in the morning standing in the street just looking at the sunflowers. I mean, that's what it's here for. Just because of how people look at them and when they see them and just how it changes their mood. I didn't want it to be symmetrical. I didn't want everything to be lined up. I want it to be like a forest. I like to live on the edge, so I plant mint where you're not supposed to. These are seed pods, and these things, the seeds are in here. The wind takes them all over the place, and you'll wind up with broccoli 2 blocks away, and people wonder why. I didn't plant no broccoli. How the hell did I get broccoli? Plants want to live, you know, and they're gonna morph, and they're gonna do things, and they're gonna follow the sun. Everything they can do to survive. They let you know what they want. They let you know what they need. And I'm providing an environment where they can live. To me, it's like my solace right now. Plants change people. I have conversations with people that I've seen for years that I would never imagine. This takes some people back home, because a lot of people are from the South, and now they're living in apartment buildings where they used to be on land. I had people that would drive by and say, I just wanted my mom to see your garden. Hey, look, Mom, this is what you used to do, I guess. And they knew that their mom would, you know, feel good about seeing this. There's an elderly Japanese guy, and he would come early in the morning, and he would just walk the paths. I mean, slow. He would just walk the paths of the garden, and he's in his 80s. And he doesn't speak English. He'd just walk in the garden. So we, found a way to communicate sign language. And he brought me some plants that he wanted me to grow. I found a mother and a daughter out here at 10:30 at night. You don't just go somewhere at 10:30 at night, especially over here in somebody's garden at 10:30 at night, unless you really need it. And it hurt me. It made me sad. And I told him, take what you want. Why should there be people hungry here? One plant will give you 1,000, 2,000, 20,000 seeds. We have the land to plant them. If you look down the streets here, you see all this brown grass and grass, when you can be feeding people. They call areas like this throughout the United States, food deserts. I thought, why not have food forests?
I agree. Why not have a food forest? It's new eyes. We need to look around at the resources we've got. Just imagine, what if that caught on that street and everybody started planting in the planters, right along the curbs to the sidewalk? What if they just started planting fruit and vegetables and potatoes and yams? We have lots of resources. We need to just think about what we've got and start re-envisioning what would really help and work with the people. Because I'll tell you, if there is, just take Cyprus. They shut down the banks. Well, what happens to trade? It just shrinks that. So what happens to food deliveries? People can't buy. Food delivery can't be delivered. Everybody wants cash. Nobody has cash. Let's mull that over and start thinking in manners that, will facilitate a migration away from the society in which we're always 100% dependent on somebody else and become more self-reliant. And that goes in our money. That goes in the way we, buy and trade goods and services. I wanted to bring to your attention today, briefly, this is the Go Local website. Philip's going to join us later this week and talk more about it. But this is just Sonoma County. This is just our county, and it's only because these people have really gotten on board and they're just going to push it. Good for them. And let's get it in your county. This is something that you can do as a positive move forward. You may not be able to get people, officials, to really pay attention to foreclosures. I'm hoping that we can. I'm hoping we can stop those, keeping the people in their homes. But in the meantime, as we do that, we need to move forward. So this is really, in my humble words, it's a trading co-op. It's a network of locally owned businesses and residents and nonprofit organizations and government agencies working together to build a local thriving economy by supporting local business. And like they talked about here, 10 reasons to go local. Let's keep our own businesses thriving. It's just the same. The mall moves in and suddenly all the money that all of the businesses that pay in the mall, that all shoves out to somebody else. It shoves into the mall's owners' pockets. Why not keep it local? Let's keep our local economies thriving. Let's focus on going local in every way we can. Local public banking, local trading co-ops like this. It says locally owned businesses build strong communities by sustaining vibrant town centers and linking neighbors in a web of economic and social relationships and contributing to local causes. That's very important. Keeping local decision making, keeping the dollars in the local economy, providing extra jobs, local jobs. I just read last week, large corporations, the banks, they're chopping jobs, the mega banks. I think Chase was leading the way. They're going to chop thousands of jobs so that they can have better profits for the CEOs. That's not good for the people. Let's do what's good for the people, and let's start thinking about it that way. Let's start determining that what's good for the people is worth it. It's not all about, can I squeeze the last penny out of it? It's about, can we build our good community? Environmental sustainability and competition. A marketplace of tens of thousands of small business is the best way to ensure innovation and competition and product diversity. How many times have you gone into the stores and said, they're all carrying the same thing? I do that all the time. And so what has happened? We have a mushrooming of online small stores. Let's do that. Let's keep that local. Let's make these business opportunities available to ourselves. Now, I wanted to just share with you real quickly a couple of things that I have done personally, because this is the point. You got to do something. So what are you going to do? Well, one of the things I did yesterday is I went out and I bought a couple of fruit trees, and we're going to plant them in the yard, because the idea is if nothing happens and everything just continues to rock along and get better, we'll have wonderful apples, oranges, and cherries. if it all blows up and now food becomes an issue, we'll have apples, oranges, and cherries. And we can eat them and we can trade them. We have something that we can use to trade for other things we might need. I thought that was pretty simple and straightforward. And I think we need these kinds of simple, straightforward ideas that will help us now and help us in the future, no matter what the future is. So thanks for sharing today. Sorry we had a little bit of technical issues. That's what happens when you start moving the computer, and I apologize. I figured it out. And today, again, we want to bugger the bankers and the politicians and the bureaucrats. I mean, there's some really good ideas in our theme song as we part ways. Thanks again so much for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye now.
When I was a lass, I was proud of me class, like my father and mother before me.
They taught me to fight for my civil rights.
But it's always the same old story.
The rich reign supreme while the poor can but dream.
And the Labour or Liberal or Tory.
And I say, bugger the bankers and politicians. Bugger the bureaucrats too. Bugger the buggers who make up the rules. And if you're one of them, bugger you. And if you're one of them, bugger you.
The system is bent and the money's all spent. We're measured from every direction. The workers get taxed while the wealthy relax.
With nary a moment's reflection.
Where there's brass, there's muck.
And they don't give an ass, 'cause we're programmed against insurrection. And I say, bugger the bankers and politicians. Bugger the bureaucrats too. Bugger the buggers who make up the rules. And if you're one of them, bugger you. And if you're one of them, bugger you.
Now all you good people with passion to vent, don't give up the struggle for justice. But I've done my time on the protesters' line, and these days I show my dissent.
By loitering women